hppodcraft.com.
And begin.
Life is a hideous thing, and from the background behind what we know of it peer demoniacal hints of truth, which make it sometimes 1,000-fold more hideous. Science, already oppressive with its shocking revelations, will perhaps be the ultimate exterminator of our species, if separate species we be, for its reserve of unguessed horrors could never be borne by mortal brains if loosed upon the world. If we knew what we are, we should do as Sir Arthur Jermyn did, and Arthur Jermyn soaked himself in oil and set fire to his clothing one night. No one placed the charred fragments in an urn, or set a memorial to him who had been, for certain papers and a certain boxed object were found, which made men wish to forget. Some who knew him do not admit he ever existed.
Boy, this guy must have done some really bad stuff for
Yeah.
people to not want to bury him or do anything to his body. Just
Yeah,
like let
not
him.
admit that they knew him.
Yeah.
Well, it backs up the opening line of this. Life is a hideous thing.
Boy, is it.
What a great opening line.
I bet you he's going to prove this, or
Yeah.
at least attempt to in some way.
Uh-huh.
This writer named H.P. Lovecraft.
H.P. Lovecraft.
My name is Chris Lackey,
I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
and this is the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
We're at hppodcraft.com.
And this week we're talking about a story called The Facts Concerning the Late Arthur Jermyn and His Family.
That's right. And that opening is pretty famous for Lovecraft. Although it almost seems like a first draft of the opening, a famous opening.
Of Call Cthulhu.
Call Cthulhu, that's right.
And it's much better in Call
Yeah.
Cthulhu.
Although,
But
life is a
first draft.
Yeah. It's first draft. That was read by Brad Lohan, who is the man behind EntertainmentBuff.com, which is a blog, a daily blog, a site for comics and movie reviews. It's very funny.
Yeah, he's good.
You should check it out.
He's good. He's real good.
Yeah.
So what happens? This guy sets himself on fire. That's the opening of the story. Pretty dramatic.
Yeah, so let's find out what would motivate that guy. It says,
Arthur Jermyn went out of the moor and burned himself after seeing the boxed object which had come from Africa. It was this object, and not his peculiar personal appearance, which made him end his life.
So here we're introducing Arthur. He's the guy in the title.
Yeah.
And what we know so far is that he's very ugly.
Yeah. Well, peculiar
He's peculiar looking.
yeah.
And
not necessarily ugly, just strange.
right. And but he's goofy looking enough that it would be a serious impediment to most people.
Yeah.
But for Arthur, he's a poet. He's a scholar, and so he manages to get through it. But that's all we know.
That's all we know.
Before we get into him too much, we way backtrack and we go through his lineage.
We want to know about his family.
Yeah. And this actually...
maybe some facts.
Exactly. We want to learn some facts about him, but what about his family?
Yeah. Facts concerning his family.
This actually occupies quite a bit of the story's text, so let's try and summarize it easily. His great-great-great-grandfather, Arthur's great-great-great-grandfather, was Sir Wade Jermyn.
Yes.
He was an early explorer of
One
the
of the
Congo
first.
region. Right.
One of the first.
And he wrote a book called Observation on the Several Parts of Africa, which had weird bits in it about a prehistoric white Congolese civilization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that little bit of information that he shared, or mystery or rumor, landed him in an asylum in 1765. But before he was sent to the madhouse.
Right.
We know that he got sent there, but he lived in a house. And I think this all takes place in England.
Yeah, yeah. Jermyn is an English name.
Right. And he had a bizarre collection of stuff from his travels, and he had this wife that nobody saw.
Nobody saw, not even the servants.
Right.
He kept them secluded, or kept her secluded, in a whole other wing of the manor that they lived in.
Yeah, Jane Eyre style. He's got her up there. He says that she's the daughter of this Portuguese trader, and it's just that she doesn't like English ways.
No, she hates it.
Yeah.
That's what he says.
It's so obvious.
Yeah, I'm not...
It's so obvious. It's like, I wish that he had added things like, nobody thought it bizarre that he had massive amounts of bananas ordered to the house in the middle of the night. Or the disturbing, almost mechanical cymbal playing coming from his wife's room.
No. No. Now, when Wade was out there, and he said there was a white... Did he say there were white people, or did he say there were white apes at this point?
He didn't. He just says that it's this white civilization.
White civilization.
So yeah, I guess they're white people.
White people, okay.
in the Congo and Africa, and when in his first couple of trips, he came back with this wife, and then they had a son together.
Yes.
When they were over in Africa, and they bring this son back here. So that's a little odd. He's got kind of an eccentric family, but
it was the talk of Sir Wade, especially when in his cups, which chiefly led his friends to deem him mad. In a rational age like the 18th century, it was unwise for a man of learning to talk about wild sights and strange scenes under a Congo moon. of the gigantic walls and pillars of a forgotten city, crumbling and vine-grown, and of damp, silent stone steps leading interminably down into the darkness of abysmal treasure vaults and inconceivable catacombs, especially was unwise to rave of the living things that might haunt such a place, of creatures half of the jungle and half of the impiously aged city, things that might have sprung up after the great apes had overrun the dying city, with the vaults and the pillars, the vaults and the weird carvings.
So yeah, he was talking about this ancient city that he found in his travels in the Congo.
Yeah, he'd get a little drunk and say, they got chimp boys up there in the Congo. Planet of the Apes stuff or Island of Dr. Moreau.
Dr. Moreau kind of craziness.
They shut Sir Wade away for
Yes,
talking all this craziness, and his son that he had with this mysterious wife is Philip, who is coarse, and he's almost like a Mr. Hyde kind of figure.
Yeah, he's sort of vaguely described some sort of ape-like qualities to him.
And Philip, he marries a gypsy woman, whom he knocks up, but before the gypsy has... they think she might be of gypsy extraction.
Right.
Before that kid is born, he slips off into the Navy, and all anybody knows about Philip is that he eventually disappeared off the Congo coast.
Yeah, nobody ever saw Philip again.
Yeah, so maybe he went back to where his father had done his
stuff.
Yeah, his exploring. Now, the son of Philip is Robert Jermyn.
Yeah.
And he's actually kind of handsome. So maybe that was some of that gypsy blood getting in there.
Oh, yeah, hello.
He starts studying his grandfather. Sir Wade is now his grandfather.
Yeah.
Starts studying Sir Wade's relics from Africa. And Robert gets himself a wife, and he has 3 kids, 2 of whom are never seen.
Right.
Because they're, people assume deformed.
Yeah, they have some kind of deformities, or they're, I think he said deformed of the mind also, that they're just kind of messed up.
Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
So, but the son that does show himself of Robert's is Neville.
Mm-hmm.
And Neville is the next Jermyn, and he's a repellent type. He's not as handsome as his father.
No.
And he actually at some point runs away with a dancer. All these Jermyn men seem to like artistic women.
Artistic, kind of free-spirited types.
And he runs away with a dancer, and he comes back to his father, and he's a widower. His wife died along the way somehow, but he's got a son, Alfred. And Alfred actually, I think, ends up being Arthur's father.
dad.
Yeah. So we're getting there.
We're finally
at a biblical pace.
Yes.
We're getting to the main character.
There's a lot of begatting going on here.
There is a bit of oddity here that's pretty cool. Robert, who had been traveling to Africa on these expositions to sort of support his grandfather's research,
Right.
he dies in a kind of violent episode.
Yeah.
A friend, an explorer, comes to see him, and he's got a manuscript of notes that he collected among an African tribe called the Ongas. And it has details about a gray city, white apes, ruled by...
like a goddess or
like a white god.
A white god.
Yeah. The explorer comes, and they kind of go into a room to talk about it.
And then he freaking kills him.
Yeah. Whatever he hears from this explorer, he freaks out, and
Yep.
he strangles the explorer, and then he kills his 3 kids,
He kills his children.
including Neville.
Yeah.
But Neville dies, somewhat heroically defending his own son, Alfred. And Robert gets institutionalized. He dies in the institution of apoplexy,
Yes.
which is kind of an antiquated thing.
Yeah, well, a little background on this one. The apoplexy is kind of like a paralysis. Supposedly, Lovecraft's father, he died of syphilis. But supposedly Lovecraft didn't really know it was syphilis.
Yeah.
His mom told him that he suffered from
Apoplexy.
apoplexy. And so there's a little bit of... I mean, the story has a lot of Lovecraft weaving his own personal family.
And I think that this
stories
little section, especially about Alfred, is very similar to him because of the apoplexy, which he might have, was told. And that was kind of a catch-all disease. It means that they had a fury or whatever, and then they went paralyzed.
Yeah, they couldn't move or anything like that.
Which
also wasn't true. His dad didn't suffer from it because there are accounts of him going, like, when he was suffering from syphilis in the institution, he would like be screaming all night and causing problems,
right?
Because he went totally nuts.
Yeah.
But Lovecraft thought in his correspondence that he had he was paralyzed.
Right. So it's similar to how Lovecraft's dad went away.
Yeah.
And then so Alfred, he grows up with the title, and he hooks up with a music hall singer, and they have a kid, and this is Arthur. But Alfred, he ends up joining the circus and kind of leaving them behind. He runs away with the circus, and he gets in a bizarre gorilla accident.
Yeah, kind of strange.
He gets obsessed. Well, in the circus, they have a gorilla, and he gets obsessed with it and starts training it to do... He's really good with this gorilla.
Yes.
Alfred is, and he teaches it to do special tricks, and it's really good, but during one performance, they're doing a little boxing match.
Yeah, it's a little bit that they're... Because for some reason, he has a rapport with this gorilla,
Right.
you know. I wonder why. And they do this bit where, yeah, like you said, there's a boxing match, like, little shtick that they do. But I guess at one point the gorilla freaking hits him too hard, and he goes nuts, and he freaking attacks the gorilla like in a rage.
Yeah, he bites him.
He bites him, yeah, and then the gorilla's like, I'm not putting up with that, and just freaking kills him.
Yeah, the gorilla, he just annihilates him. The funny thing I thought there was Lovecraft, he doesn't refer to it specifically as the Barnum and Bailey Circus, but he calls it the greatest show on earth, in quotes. Yeah. It reminded me of these urban legends about Disneyland. And you're like, I'm not going to say the name of it, you know. Somebody will say, like, there's a series of tunnels underneath this theme park where they keep, you know, child prostitutes and where, you know, they enslave people. I'm not going to say what it is, but I'll just say it isn't always the happiest place on earth. You know, they throw it out there as if it's mysterious at all. Like, that's clever. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, golly.
Even here in the aughts, we know what you're talking about.
We know what's up.
Okay, so Arthur now is the last of the
he's the
Germans.
last one because his dad took off.
This is actually, we get into this is the second chapter of the story. So the first chapter kind of set up all this lineage for us. And here in the second chapter, we get to Arthur. It says,
When the husband and father deserted his family, the mother took the child to Jermyn house, where there was none left to object to her presence. She was not without notions of what a nobleman's dignity should be, and saw to it that her son received the best education which limited money could provide. The family resources were now sadly slender, and the Jermyn house had fallen into woeful disrepair. But young Arthur loved the old edifice, and all its contents. He was not like any other German who had ever lived, for he was a poet and a dreamer.
Well, that sounds familiar.
yeah.
I think it's not too cleverly veiled, but this seems like Lovecraft. When he was a kid, his house, you know, they had money, but it fell into disrepair because the fortune was lost. And he loved the place, and he was a dreamer, and he was off on his own, and he felt very different from everybody else.
And he was kind of not a very good-looking person.
No.
And I know that Lovecraft had some anxiety over his own physical appearance.
Right. Which I guess was kind of his mom really.
Yeah, he actually doesn't seem that bad looking to me.
No,
he looks like maybe he's a little odd, but
he's a little weird looking, but not that bad.
Well, as it pertains to Arthur, Lovecraft writes,
It is hard to say just what he resembled, but his expression, his facial angle, and the length of his arms gave a thrill of repulsion to those who met him for the first time.
Length of his arms.
Yeah,
I
strange.
don't remember that.
So Arthur, he goes off to school, and after he gets out of Oxford, he does what a lot of his forebears have done, and he decides to take up the family business and examine Sir Wade's work.
In 1911, after the death of his mother, Sir Arthur Jermyn determined to pursue his investigations to the utmost extent. Selling a portion of his estate to obtain the requisite money, he outfitted an expedition and sailed for the Congo.
So he goes out there, and he gets all kinds of information. And as it turns out, it looks like his great-great-great-grandpa wasn't all that crazy. He talks to this tribal chief named Mwanu.
According to Mwanu, the Grey City and the hybrid creatures were no more, having been annihilated by the warlike Nabangus many years ago. This tribe, after destroying most of the edifices and killing the live beings, had carried off the stuffed goddess, which had been the object of their quest, the white ape goddess, which the strange beings worshipped, and which was held by Congo tradition to be the form of one who had reigned as a princess among these beings.
So she was some important, leader who's deified, which isn't too uncommon. And like the Egyptians believe their kings were gods manifest,
And there's stories about this ape princess that she was the consort of this great white god, and they had a child together, and then all three went away.
Right.
Which syncs up with Sir Wade's stories, earlier when he was in his house and he had this strange wife, and they had their son that they brought back from Africa.
Right.
And in these legends in the Congo, some say that the husband returned and enshrined the body himself. Some say the son later returned as a man, which syncs up with his son having disappeared off the coast of the Congo.
Yep.
So this is all kind of coming together. Arthur, he sails back to England, but when he does, he finds out from this Belgian trader, the trader, he knows where the stuffed goddess is.
Yeah.
And he says, what the tribe who has it, they're submissive. They can be talked into parting with it.
It's crazy.
Talked into parting with it. And check it out, I'm going to take care of this for you, and you're going to get it in the mail.
Sure.
So Arthur's very excited. He gets back to England, he waits around, and it's some of the justification he has in here is funny when he's like, well, why is it that my that Sir Wade kept that woman in the house. It must have been that she just didn't agree with his fanciful notions about the Congo, and that'd be hard for any man to take. So he probably just didn't want her to be around because he was mad at her all the time. So ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
So he soon gets a letter from his Belgian friend that they found it.
Uh-huh.
It was the Belgian affair, a most extraordinary object, an object quite beyond the power of a layman to classify. Whether it was human or simian, only a scientist could determine, and the process of determination would be greatly hampered by its imperfect condition. Time and the Congo climate are not kind to mummies, especially when their preparation is as amateurish as seemed to be the case here. Around the creature's neck had been found a golden chain bearing an empty locket, no doubt some hapless traveler's keepsake.
Just hearing that just now, time and the Congo climate are not kind to mummies. Like, mummies are going online. Like, if you're going to go on vacation, do not go there.
Don't go to the Congo. It's
Bad
totally
climate.
not good for us. Stick to Egypt. Stick to Egypt. Or even Southern California is not bad, you know? Yeah.
The Belgian also suggests some kind of humorous comparison in his letter, but he doesn't go into much detail. It hints that maybe he made a joke like, you should see this thing. You'll get it when you see it. Like, it might remind you of somebody. You know, it's like he made a little joke. It says that in there, but he doesn't say what it is.
Right.
He probably thought it was going to be pretty funny. Oh, no.
No, not very funny.
So the thing arrives, and the German butler recalls what happened.
Mm-hmm.
According to this trustworthy man, Sir Arthur Jermyn dismissed everyone from the room before opening the box. Nothing was heard for some time. Just how long, Soames cannot exactly determine. But it was certainly less than a quarter of an hour later that the horrible scream, undoubtedly in Jermyn's voice, was heard. Immediately afterward, Jermyn emerged from the room, rushing frantically toward the front of the house as if pursued by some hideous enemy. The expression on his face, a face ghastly enough in repose, was beyond description. When near the front door, he seemed to think of something, and turned back in his flight, finally disappearing down the stairs to the cellar. The servants were utterly dumbfounded, and watched at the head of the stairs, but their master did not return. A smell of oil was all that came up from the regions below. After dark, a rattling was heard at the door leading in from the cellar into the courtyard, and a stable boy saw Arthur Jermyn, glistening from head to foot with oil, and redolent of that fluid, steal furtively out and vanish on the black moor surrounding the house. Then, in an exultation of supreme horror, everyone saw the end. A spark appeared on the moor, a flame arose, and a pillar of human fire reached to the heavens. The house of Jermyn no longer existed.
Man. That something so horrible must have happened that made him, something that he saw, something that was in that package, that made him set himself on fire. Like, what could possibly be that bad?
I don't know. Well, they wonder about that, and so they go in and examine the mummy.
The two particulars in question are these. The arms on the golden locket about the creature's neck were the German arms, and the Jacot's suggestion about certain resemblance as connected with the shriveled face applied with vivid, ghastly, and unnatural horror to none other than the sensitive Arthur Jermyn, great-great-great-grandson of Sir Wade Jermyn and an unknown wife. Members of the Royal Anthropological Institute burned the thing and threw the locket into a well, and some of them do not admit that Arthur Jermyn ever existed.
Wow.
That's
the end.
It's the end of the House of Jermyn and the end of this story.
The end of the story. Not that horrific, really. I mean, it's kind of disturbing, but
right.
I mean, I would be kind of a little creeped out if I found out that I was descended from a half ape woman was my great grandmother.
Yeah.
Like, I'd go, wow, that feel a little weirded out by that. But to set yourself on fire because of it,
yeah,
like,
man. I don't know.
I gotta say, let down by the story.
Well, I remember I read it when I was in high school, and even then I thought it was pretty silly. And then rereading it recently kind of confirmed that opinion. But when I asked Brad to do the reading for this, he wasn't familiar with the story, and he asked me what it was. Without thinking, I just said to him, it's about this guy, you know, he sets himself on fire when he finds out his great-great-grandpa the gorilla. And Brad was like, are you kidding? That story sounds awesome. And I thought, well, yeah, you know what? It kind of is. You know, you just said that. Who would set themselves on fire? Actually, I remember, and maybe it was in the mid-'90s or late '90s, there was a woman in Peoria, Peoria, Illinois, who drove her car into the gas station, or maybe she just walked up there. She paid for some gas. She doused herself in the gasoline and then set herself on fire right there. You remember that?
No. I don't remember.
I'm sure that's not the only time that's happened.
I mean, you could just be crazy and set yourself on fire, and I understand that.
Yeah.
But this is supposed to be a horrific revelation that would, it's not that horrific. It's like, come on. I mean, we're all descended from apes, and we all have
not that close.
Not that close, no.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not even an ape. It's like a half ape. It's this.
Right.
There's a whole bunch of stuff in the background of this. At this time, this is something Ken Hite talks about in his book too. Is that at the time, scientific racism was really prevalent. This is before, the whole eugenics thing was going on. Like, scientifically speaking, it'll be in the genes that, some people are better than other people.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that was something that was going on, and it's really confusing in this story because the line at the very beginning kind of implies that we all might be descended from the white apes. All white people.
All white people.
All white people might be descended from the white apes. So, we're even much more different from black people, according to Lovecraft, black people or any other kind of non-white people, than we think. Like, we even descended from different apes than they descended from, which is, just effed up and
strange.
And weird. Maybe it's just, this is a product of the time, this is one of those things, maybe at the time it was really horrific to think that you came from an ape, and maybe evolution still wasn't really accepted.
Right.
I mean, the Scopes monkey trial isn't until 1926. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's not. I mean, people were outraged before then when people tried to teach evolution in schools.
Right, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, maybe part of the horror of this is that not only that we're descended from apes, but we're you're actually interbred with apes, and there's something that's going on.
Well, it's similar to the Tomb, in that there's that horror of a cursed lineage, being connected to these ancestors and finding out this hideous thing about your past.
Well, it's sort of, and then again, it ties into Lovecraft. Like, this is, it seems pretty obvious that both his parents went insane. He didn't know that it was from syphilis.
Yeah, right.
So he must have been thinking, I'm going to eventually, what happened to my parents is going to happen to me. Mm-hmm. And I think that comes across in the story. Like, this is kind of an allegory to his own family.
And we touched on it when we talked about the Tomb. I think that it's something that it's almost a universal experience that people in the short term think, holy crap, I'm becoming my parents. Yeah. Maybe in the long term, they think, if you're an American, I can't believe my people did what they did to the Native Americans. Or like in our last show, we talked about the temple, the Jermyn guy. This guy's name is Arthur Jermyn. Yeah. It made me think, I'm of German extraction, and sometimes I'm, God, my people did that.
Oh, geez.
It's just.
There's a lot
but that's the story of the human race, right?
Yeah.
But
humans have done horrible things. So there is no people that is exempt from
absolutely not
being descended from people that did horrible things.
And yet that moment of realization when it's like, these are my people that did this, and I'm from this tradition of people who maybe did that. It's not a pleasant thing.
No. But I mean. But on all honesty, I mean, these ideas are very interesting and could have been explored in a much more interesting way, and two, just told better storytelling. Like,
sure,
the first part of this is just like a genealogical.
And it's confusing.
Yeah, and it's like, wait, Arthur and Alfred, their names are very similar, and so wait, who's the I read it a few times and it was still confused by, who was whose father. And
it was almost worth it, though, for the scene with the boxing match with the gorilla.
The boxing gorilla.
Because that's hilarious. So somehow Alfred was wise enough to know that he could train this gorilla to do things.
Yeah.
He wasn't... Why did he set up a boxing match?
I don't know.
I didn't write this down in my notes, but there's an excellent Ed Wood movie called The Bride and the Beast.
Oh, right, yeah.
Did you see that? Yeah,
I've heard some parts of it.
I think it's a woman keeps a gorilla as her pet, and this guy marries her. Or maybe he's got the gorilla. I don't remember who's got the gorilla, but yeah, it's the guy. They get married, and he's like, I want to show you something. And she comes in, and he opens up the door, and there's a gorilla in his house in a cage. He's like, this is my pet gorilla, Spanky. I didn't tell you about it before. But when she sees him, she starts hearing jungle drums in her head, and she starts dreaming of going back to Africa. And she actually... Gosh, it's been a while since I've seen it, but the gorilla captures her, and somehow they wind up back in in the jungle.
Yeah.
And she's sort of married to this gorilla.
It's a really weird, surprisingly for
Ed Wood.
Ed Wood.
The one thing I remember about it so well though is the guy shows up to save her, and one of the gorillas attacks him, and the gorilla completely delivers a 1-2 punch. This gorilla learned fisticuffs somehow, and they have a
could have been in a boxing match.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he did. It seemed to be the thing to do at the time.
There's another excellent NPR show called Radiolab.
Oh yeah,
I've listened to every single episode of it, and folks, you should really check it out if you haven't listened to it.
It's a great show.
They had a story on there about a woman. Well, here I'll read the setup. One day in 1994, soon after Lee Silver, a professor of molecular biology and public affairs, lectured on the genetic similarity of chimpanzees and humans and the theoretical possibility of producing a hybrid chimp-human. A student who had heard him speak came to his office with an astonishing idea for a thesis project. She proposed being impregnated with the sperm of a chimpanzee, following the development of the chimp-human hybrid, aborting near the end of the pregnancy, and writing up the experiment for her senior thesis. Would Silver be her advisor, she asked. Silver was speechless. That incident became the spark for a play that Silver co-wrote with a New York actor and playwright, Jeremy Carrigan. It's called The Sweet, Sweet Motherhood.
Yeah.
So she didn't actually do it.
No, she didn't do it. Fortunately, he talked her out of doing
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And it was funny too because it seemed like she was like kind of a party girl, and that was like her easy way of having to do any work.
Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah,
it does
yeah.
sound like an '80s movie or something.
Yeah, she's like,
I can never pass this class.
But what if I impregnate myself with some chip sperm?
And then girls just want to have fun, starts playing. then you cut to a chimp, in a dormitory, like dancing and stuff. Maybe she falls in love with the donor or something.
Oh dear. Yeah.
Maybe that's the prequel to MVP.
Could be.
Most Valuable Primate.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Chimp playing hockey.
Pretty amazing movie.
Well, this guy Silver says the play asks, what does it mean to be human? By looking at whether a chimp-human hybrid would it be human? Would it be a chimp? And to examine the genetic similarity, he says, this is a very threatening question because the Judeo-Christian idea that human beings as a species, they're absolutely distinct from all other species.
Right.
So it's threatening,
Yeah. And it's the same thing that happened at the Scopes trial. Like that's what humans were special, and by us being equated to these animals and being part of them or related to them. Again, we're not descended. It's the apes and us have a common ancestor.
Right.
We're not descended from chimps. We
Yeah.
both have, at one point we were cousins or brothers or like way up the evolutionary chain. But that it would freak people out, especially since people thought that they were the best.
Sacha Baron Cohen did it really well when in an Ali G episode when he was talking to an anti-evolution guy, and he said, "Well, in that character of Ali G, well, I like bananas. Chimps like bananas, so how could you not believe that evolution is real?" So funny. The guy who was interviewing was so frustrated. Why was this written?
This was written.
When was it written?
When was it written? I'm not sure. It was written in 1920.
What's the background of the story?
The background of the story was first published in the Wolverine, another amateur press journal, in March and June in 21. So it was published soon after it was written. When it was first published in Weird Tales, it was reprinted in Weird Tales. It was called The White Ape, and Lovecraft was not cool with that.
Yeah, he didn't want any spoilers.
He thought it felt like it spoiled the story.
Right. As if it isn't obvious from the first paragraph.
It's really obvious. And then it was also just called Arthur Jermyn. Like, that was the name of it. But the full title's the one that we told you.
Yeah.
One of the critics, this is something that I thought was interesting, his name was William Fulwiler. He said that he felt like Lovecraft lifted the White Ape thing from Edgar Rice Burroughs' The Return of Tarzan and Tarzan and the Jewels of Opar, which the city of Opar had like these ape human.
I've read Tarzan and I have. That was one of my favorite books when I was a kid. And actually, in that book, now I haven't looked at it in a long time.
This was written, and that was written in 1916. So,
and there was there's some sort of princess in that book that I fell in love with when I read that. I remember really well.
Do you mean
she wasn't an ape princess?
Oh no,
there was an illustration of her on the cover of the book.
I see.
And wow.
I was gonna say I find it hard for a young person to fall in love with like a written character.
I did though.
But if you saw the picture,
there was.
I think it was the visual.
But she was cool. I don't remember that book that well. I really liked Edgar Rice Burroughs a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, I've never read any Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Well, Tarzan and John Carter of Mars, and there was a cool connection in. I mentioned when we did the statement of Randolph Carter that Randolph Carter appears in the first collected League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Yes,
and I incorrectly said that he was the protagonist of that story. He's not the protagonist of that story. Alan Quatermain is. But when Alan Quatermain runs into him, it's Randolph Carter, and they reveal that he's actually brothers with John Carter, who's the Edgar Rice Burroughs character who went to Mars.
Oh my God!
So they're this like brother team, which I thought was really clever. Cool.
Whoa, that's pretty neat. No, I didn't remember that. So
Yeah.
I was going to remember that. It's been a while since I've read that, but that's a really cool comic, and I recommend
It
all
is.
of our listeners to check out the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And it's not for the
Faint
delicate
of
of sensibilities.
No.
Yeah, it's
And when I was thinking about when they described Jermyn's ancestors here, and they were coarse, and I said that they reminded me of Mr. Hyde. The Mr. Hyde I'm actually referring to is the comic book Mr.
Yes.
Hyde from League of...
League
the way he's drawn, that's what I think the Germans would look like.
yeah.
Not the one from the terrible film adaptation.
No, not at all. But basically, I don't care much for the story. There's interesting parts to it. But,
Yeah. By and large, it's kind of silly. It reminds me of when the horror genre was dying down in the 40s and 50s, and all the movies they were making were more comical than they were horrific, and there were all these guerrilla movies, where they'd have like the Bowery Boys against the gorilla,
Right.
Or actually, I think there's a movie Bela Lugosi meets a Brooklyn gorilla. Somehow, how did a gorilla become a monster?
I think it was a cheap costume.
I think that's exactly
that's
what it was.
And
The
then
diagnosis correct.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly what was going on.
Oh, God.
So I agree with you. It's I wouldn't recommend it
No.
to somebody getting into this stuff.
No, please pass on this one. If you never
Yeah.
read this story, I think you're better off skipping it. Yeah.
I don't know about better
Hey,
off,
look,
but you're
I'm
not
just
going to miss
saying-
out.
No, you're not going to miss out. If you listen to this podcast, you've done enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's
on
true.
the Arthur Jermyn stuff, because there's a finite time in all of our lives.
You're right.
And there's other things you should be reading.
Yeah, or skip right to the second chapter.
Right.
Read the first paragraph and then skip to the second chapter.
Or if you just want to be a completist, read the damn thing.
Yeah.
Well,
That's what we did.
That's what we did. But I have nothing more to say about this, and I
Myself
would love
neither.
to wrap up this week's episode. I want to thank our reader again.
Yes, Brad Lohan, entertainmentbuff.com. Check it out.
Yeah, check him out. It's good
And
stuff.
next week we are going to be talking about The Street.
The Street, yeah.
And we're going to have a special guest.
Special guest, kind of an expert.
Yeah, we're going
on
to
the
talk
street.
a little bit more next week about the larger literary significance of H.P. Lovecraft, as well as the story of The Street,
Yeah.
with our special guest, Matt Barisi.
Yeah.
And we'll get to know him a little better next week.
Yeah,
So
he'll be on.
for now, I'm Chad Pfeiffer.
I'm Chris Lackey, and this has been the H.P. Lovecraft Literary Podcast.
HPPodcraft.com.
hppodcraft.com.